Good morning, and thanks for tuning into the DMZ America podcast. With me, Ted Rall, and Scott Stantis. I'm Ted Rall, editorial cartoonist coming from the left.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis coming to you from the right. And we are joined by pole vaulting savant, and that's what he's best known for, Steve Kelley. No, I'm kidding. He's editorial cartoonist, has been for the San Diego Union-Tribune, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So he has almost as many formers as I do, which is
that's what all media meetings are everywhere. Like when you watch CNN or whatever, and there's a panel, it's always like, joining us is the former editorial page editor of the blah, blah, blah. Joining us is the former executive editor, the former.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
And soon it'll be like the former editor of the former Washington Post.
Yeah, that's coming up fast, isn't it? Hey, before we get started, Steve, I did want to ask you something. We're bringing Steve back because we had some technical difficulties last time. Hopefully, knock wood, we won't have this time. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette recently announced that it's going to cease all publications, both print and digital, in May, I believe. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I just think it's a tragedy. I mean, anytime a newspaper closes its doors, especially one as with the history that one has in that city. I mean, it's in the DNA of the city. It's a real tragedy, and I feel bad for the publisher because it was in that family for a couple of centuries. So, and you have to feel for the sports fans in Pittsburgh, because of the work that the sports department there did, constantly covering everything.
But Steve, I do feel like you're forgetting the silver lining here, which is the politicians are super happy.
Oh, that's a silver lining?
I mean, they're in the corridors of power there in Western Pennsylvania. The champagne glasses are clinking.
I suppose you're right. Yeah, I mean, when you suffocate the watchdog, the criminals celebrate.
They do.
And I know you. I mean, you're not in the family. You're not one of the Block family or anything. But why? I mean, it just seemed curious to me. The length of time. Usually, when papers close, and we know some cartoonists who worked at, say, the Rocky Mountain News or the Tucson Citizen. I mean, they announce on Wednesday night that Friday's the last edition. It's bam.
Interesting. Yeah.
Why waiting so long? And two, why obliterate all presence? Because this means Pittsburgh, a city of what, 2.5 roughly million people, is going to have no news coverage of. I mean, they have some startup, right? Some news sites, but
a lot of the staff. They were having labor disputes up there between the management and the newsroom for decades, and they just. I think that when you're worried about your job and how you're going to pay your bills, it's difficult to understand the economic dynamics of owning and running a successful newspaper now, and it's. You don't want to say it's a fool's errand because I guess some of them are still doing it, but it's. I don't know what to tell you. You don't want to say bad things about the industry, but it's hard to sustain publishing and producing and delivering newspapers now. Every step of the way, it's just expensive.
For sure. It obviously still can be done. The New York Times is doing it. That's an N of one. I guess I wanted to ask you about the Washington Post. I'm befuddled. How is it that a man who is at least one of the three richest men in the universe is unable or unwilling to, even if he doesn't care about the coverage or that democracy dies in darkness, why would he not want a mouthpiece that he can use to influence official Washington through its editorial page to help prop up his own businesses like so many other wealthy newspaper owners have done in the past? He's literally slashed the payroll of the Washington Post by 80% in a relatively short time. You would think he just want this to keep going and view it as a lost leader.
Well, if you're the wealthiest, one of the three wealthiest men did you say the universe?
Yeah,
Have we
as far as I know, yeah.
I'm just asking that.
Yeah.
You know, he probably doesn't like being loathed. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that. And I think that Bezos might have felt that he was going to come in there and save the day for a struggling publication. And he gets in there and sees how difficult it is to deal with people who don't have the economic bottom line that they have to mind. And he's not someone who likes to invest and lose money. That's just my impression. I don't have any inside track on that.
Well, that strikes me, that famous line from Citizen Kane where, Kane is being confronted by the guy who handles his trust. He says, yeah, I'll lose $1 million this year. I'll probably lose $1 million next year. At this rate, I'll have to close down the paper in 60 years. That's not how rich people or anybody really thinks. Like, this is a charity event, and the amount of money that the Post was hemorrhaging, like the numbers we were privy to, was $500 million a year. I mean, that's a lot of money for any.
I could see spending a lot of money, though. I'm the resident socialist here, and I could really see running the Washington Post for less money, right? I mean, you could hire. First of all, I don't understand why newspapers have a big office anymore. I mean, reporters can write anywhere.
Is someone typing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's not me.
Not me. Steve.
Yeah, Steve's clickety clacketing on his keyboard.
I like it there. They have being food right there.
Okay, I couldn't hear any of that.
Yeah, but, just a tad.
Oh,
but anyway, no. But the thing is that, like, okay, why would you not, say, okay, we're getting rid of the giant office. Why not why not like hire a bunch of young, hungry reporters? I mean, they've done some of that. Why not just have this operation be leaner and meaner and still just do it?
The sound is breaking up on my side.
Yeah, we're losing Steve again. Well,
There goes.
Okay.
All right, it's better now.
Not much.
No, it's not too good. Steve sounds like he's calling from the Romulan homeworld.
It sounds like when the astronauts came around the moon.
Yeah, it's really bad, Steve.
Didn't we do this last time?
Yeah, well,
yeah,
we kind of did.
Yeah.
We will figure something out next time, but I think we're going to have to cut Steve loose. What do you think, Ted?
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, Steve, we'll try it again. We'll make sure that you're faith to civilization.
Thanks, Steve. So sorry.
Thanks again.
Yeah, you got to have hardwired to do video Wi-Fi. I mean, to do video podcasting. I think you got to have a hardwired connection, or just like really, really strong Wi-Fi. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
And I put up the flag of Virginia for Steve.
Oh, that's is he from Virginia?
Yeah, that's where he's currently residing, and the flag says Virginia, just in case you were wondering. But their seal also has 6 Semper Tyrannis at the bottom, which is what John Wilkes Booth said after he shot Lincoln. So I'm just thinking, I unfurled the flag. I went, too soon, man. Too soon.
Isn't that also what Brutus said after stabbing Caesar?
Well, it's Latin, so sure. It's not in the play. I mean, the only Latin in the play is "Et tu, Brute."
Right, but I thought, is that true? Huh. Okay.
Honest. Have I ever lied to you about Latin before, Ted?
No, not about Latin.
See?
Yeah, so true. I'm going to just try Steve one more time and see if we hear him. Steve?
Is he still there?
Nope.
No.
He's still there, but he's faded to black, much like the last scene of The Sopranos. Well,
we can still we can talk. We can put his cartoons up and we can talk about them.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put up Steve's cartoons, and he can watch us helplessly as we as we as we dissect them.
Well, Steve and I
Okay.
were actually talking just before the show, and he talked about his artwork and how he said no one looks at his artwork and thinks, this is great art. And I disagree. For instance, this is a terrific caricature of Senator Schiff from
That's
California.
true. That is true.
And I've seen his art that he produced in college, and it is very, very good. And some paintings in his place when he was living in San Diego. And I think his work is designed for exactly what I think editorial cartooning, the strengths are today, which is the quick consumption. I mean, it is very much in the Ted Rall model in some ways, that it's simple. It's graphically easy to comprehend the setting, very quick. And in Steve's case, the caricaturing is really solid enough where you don't need to label. I mean,
100%.
I still label like them because, I think it's 1953, apparently.
So let's talk about this cartoon about.
But apparently, yeah. So for those
Schiff.
who are listening, it is Schiff talking to reporters saying 83% of Americans across every demographic believe an ID should be required
And
to
this
vote.
is true, by the way, according to a recent poll.
Yes, of course, allowing 83% of voters to get their way would be a threat to our democracy.
I saw this cartoon when it came out a couple days ago, and I did laugh, I will admit.
It's interesting too. It's damn shame we lost Steve, because I would love to talk about how, people talk about democratic and democracy and the people's right to voice their opinion, unless of course it's a contrary opinion, in which case we don't. And Ted, you know better than most that both sides adhere to this. That
Yes, that's true.
I will defend to the death your right to say what I agree with. If I could paraphrase Voltaire. Steve is one of those guys. This sounds like a memorial. It's not. I'm sorry, he's not. Like I said, I told him to
only his Wi-Fi connection is dead.
Yes, the rest of him is more than.
And we have the technology. We can't.
And I mentioned the pole vaulting. He is now a master pole vaulter, and that's not metaphor or for anything else.
For homosexuality.
He's literally a pole vaulter and competes. And
what? Are you serious? Really?
Yeah, I think that's amazing, don't you? I mean,
yeah, I do.
Is
that new? Is that something he just started doing?
He started when he was 62. He pole vaulted in high school and college.
And he came back to it.
And then he stopped. So he graduated at 22. And then he picked 40 years later, decided, what I miss?
Pole vaulting.
Pole vaulting.
Yeah, let me just say, among the many things I did in high school that I would not do today would be like ice skating and jump and running the hurdles. The 100 meter hurdles are not going to be a good fit for my.
You were a
lifestyle
hurdler?
right
I didn't
now.
know that. Were you any good?
No, not at all. No, the only thing I was good at was I set a school record for whatever that's worth in a school that is now closed. But in the 220, I was a sprinter.
They figured they peaked.
I was really I was good for the quick burst of energy.
But well, that's what. Yeah. So, and you held the record. You set a record?
Yeah, for the 220 in my high school.
Wow, I had no idea. Are there pictures or videos of this?
No, because it was 1979. So
well, they had photography back then, Ted.
Nobody took photos of. We weren't gay back then. We didn't take pictures of look at what we ate. Nobody took pictures of a fucking track meet at Kettering Fairmount West High School.
Oh, come on. The Dayton Daily News didn't come out and cover that stuff?
Yeah, not so much.
Really?
No, not even the Kettering Oakwood Times, which ran my cartoons. But no, it's a school track meet. Nobody cared. There was no press.
But show another Steve Kelley, because I want to talk about.
Okay.
And like I said, I I wish he was able to hold on, because I would have loved to have talked to him about the frustrations of there's always been a handful of cartoonists in our profession who don't have Pulitzer Prizes. And Steve Kelley, especially in the cartoonist, he came in roughly the same time I did, or roughly the same age. This is, it looks like Kamala's husband, right? Saying Kamala wants to be much better prepared for her 2028 presidential campaign. And it pulls back.
Although I really don't think she's running, but yes.
Oh, I think she is.
Okay.
but pulls back and she's at her desk, and he's saying, so she's already compiling a database of potential staff, media heavyweights, and underperforming voting blocks to blame when she loses. But her caricatures, I mean, again, his caricature here, he was reprinted flipping everywhere.
That's true.
When that meant something. This is, again, back in the day. And he was one of the cartoonists who I always was stunned had never won a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, it is surprising. Has he been shortlisted?
Not to my knowledge.
I'll have to look that up.
No, I mean, and that's it's so weird. And I think that being conservative.
He was shortlisted in 1999.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. He and I can both say that we were shortlisted in the 90s.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's just, okay. So you got kind of close, but it's one of those instances where, I mean, if you could not pick up a compilation, you could not pick up a newspaper that ran a gallery or a magazine where he wasn't prominently displayed. And he was—
That's true. He was in Newsweek all the time.
In the New York Times, and the
true.
Washington Post, and the Chicago Tribune. I know this because I pick those papers up and go, son of a bitch. He'd be in there again. So, and here is a water cooler and the man bun guy saying Democrats dismiss Melania's documentary as fawning drivel, and Republicans describe it as engaging and informative. How can that be? And the woman is saying Republicans actually saw the movie, which I'm not sure is true. I don't
know if anyone's really seen the movie.
It's not.
I'm not sure Melania saw the movie.
And I have misgivings about documentaries that are underwritten and supported by the subjects, because you're not going to see any bad side, and apparently you don't. It's just it's not great filmmaking. It's from my understanding. I haven't seen it though, to be fair. So, and I would
pay to see it in the theater. Would I see it if it was on Netflix? Sure.
I think just to see, because I'm such a history nut and a presidency nut, I'd love to see, the quarters, the residents. Here's two people standing in front of a newspaper rack, which is becoming less and less of a trope that we can use, actually. And the headline is—
That's so true. Yeah.
It really is true, because
there are no racks anymore.
I've been with children who have, like young children, like 4 years old. We were walking around and they looked at a newspaper rack and asked what that was.
I believe you.
But the headline on this newspaper is journalist Don Lemon arrested for a church riot. And one woman is grabbing her head, said, that is unbelievable and completely indefensible. And the other guy is saying, totally. Who thinks of Don Lemon as a journalist? I mean, it's a funny joke. And I did want to ask Steve about the particulars of this story.
Me too. I would look, I have to say this, it's been a right-wing talking point for some time that the anti-ICE protesters in Minneapolis are rioters. And I guess I have a different definition of riot than they do. But being disruptive or being annoying or shouting or carrying signs or whistling at people is not my definition of a riot. LA riots in 1992, that's a riot. Was it 1991? Whatever. A riot is where windows get broken, cars get overturned, buildings get set on fire. I guess you could argue that when the the old police precinct storage house was set ablaze in Minneapolis during BLM, that was a riot. This is not rioting. There's no rioting. If any, the closest to rioting has been ICE itself.
Well, and the specifics of the Don Lemon case, which are curious to say the least, he had already volunteered to turn himself in, and they came to find him.
Yeah, he was on that. They came to his hotel, right? He was in LA to cover the Oscars or the Golden Globes.
Oh, that was Grammys. It's Golden Globes.
Golden Globes, yeah.
Okay. And I was about to diss on the number of awards, but I come from newspapering, which at one time had more self-serving awards than any other industry.
We have a question from Mr. A. Lee. Do any cartoonists make animated shorts to post on social media? And
we do. In fact, we had one of them.
Yeah. Mark Fiore, Fiore, is without a doubt the most prominent such person. And we interviewed him, I don't know, about 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So to look at the archives here on DMZ America, and you will find that. And others have done that too. I took a shot at it back in 2009, 2010. Didn't get any traction, but you can find those on my website, rall.com.
Yeah, what happened with those? I mean, I can remember you giving it the old college try. Was it just no traffic, no interest?
No one wanted to buy them. So
buy them. Yeah. You can. I think you're more than happy. They're more than happy to have you post them to different socials now.
Sure.
Monetizing it,
but it's just like it's a lot of work, and it's like it wasn't worth it to me to do it without any money at all.
How much work was it?
Quite a bit. I mean, first of all, I had to create a library of sort of stock characters like the president, the first lady, and so on, and then backgrounds. And then I had to, whenever for each individual one that needed new stuff, I had to do more artwork. I didn't do any of the animation. I sent it into my animator, David Essman, and he did all that. And even said he did a great job using vector animation, but it was still a lot of work. I mean, mostly for him, really. But but for both of us, it was kind of like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
It's a whole day to do one 5-minute animation, and what's the point, right?
And that had been tried a few years prior to that. There was a company that came out. Golly, I can't remember love being old. It's awesome. But the name of the company. But they approached a number of editorial cartoonists to animate their work. And it was a very high-end animation studio, and it was. The results were okay, but I didn't find them very compelling. I mean, Mark Fiore's work is designed to be an animated commentary, and that's why that works. I think
you can't just take a static cartoon and adapt it into animation. It's just not going to. It's not the same. It's not the same medium. I mean,
and Walt Handelsman, for instance, has done some animations. Actually, won his second Pulitzer with animations.
Mike Thompson's done animated.
Mike Thompson has really gone the extra mile on this, and
I will not tell the story that you told me about that. Oh my God.
No. It's word of secrecy, but secrecy. Yeah. So there are people doing it. There are people thinking about it. I just don't know unless there's some, yes, Mr. A. Lee, you're right. And I'm actually looking at it. If you could send to Ted, and Ted will forward to me some AI or some other software you would recommend, because I'm looking to do, I had some animation shows. Ted, I'm not sure if I ever told you this, but I gave myself, when I was shit canned from one job and waiting for another, I could decide to give myself 2 years to try to sell an animated show in Hollywood, and came within a whisker a couple of times. It was frustrating to say the least, but it was interesting and exciting. But I still have the animation projects and the storyboards. Obviously no animation, because back then, this was in the early 90s, was prohibitively expensive, and we didn't do it. But I think it would be fun if I could find some software that's usable and that's easy to use, and just try my hand at these animations and just crank them out. Because like I said, they're already written, the scripts are written, they're storyboarded, and I think it might be kind of fun to give it a shot.
Totally. I mean, yeah, no, I as you know, I had a couple of experiences also that felt like I came close, although you never really know for sure. Yeah. So,
more. Let's see some of yours.
Do I have any? I'm trying to see. I think that was it for Stephen. Okay, for Steve. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me dig up some of mine. Okay. This will be. I have 3 from last week. I'll show. Or you've
been on a roll, by the way.
Oh, thank you. This one was a little bit dangerous.
Oh God.
So basically, I kept thinking, like, what is the point of having a gun for self-protection if you don't use it to self-protect? And so I thought, I'm always interested in the conceit of the obituary cartoon, as you know, Scott. Yes. I've been critical of obituary cartoons in general, but I've done I like to do sort of weird takes on it. So here I'm thinking, okay, we'll just have these two. They're both dead. They have all of eternity to mull things over and reconsider their lives. And so I was like, I wonder if Alex Pretty, wherever he is now in the astral plane, is thinking, I probably should have shot those ice fuckers, or one of them.
What kind of reaction did you get? Did you get ICE or any other federal agency contacting you about this?
Not yet. When I sent it out, I was, first of all, I went through several sketches of this cartoon, and you can probably imagine that the previous ones were harsher. This was a more mellow version. I think it works. No, I haven't heard from any goon agencies or anything like that, but I definitely knew it was really out there. And I did get accused of inciting violence. But I'm like, first of all, people understand that, like, when you show a cartoon character saying something, that's not you saying something. That's your character saying something. So that's different kind of commentary. And I think it's something that not everyone understands. But yeah, but I thought it was, I thought this was I was surprised that for the most part, the reception to this cartoon was favorable. And I think people understood what it was about. And I think, people are it's kind of like, look, when random people who claim to be ICE, attack you, and they're not identified. And it's America. You have the right to shoot them.
And they're dressed in Walmart's finest ammo.
Yeah. There's no ID, and you have they don't even have like a stolen police cruiser. They're in a rental car. There are cases now of people who have pretended to be ICE officers who have abducted and raped women. So it's like, it's a legitimate concern to think these people aren't who they say they are. You show me a fucking ID and I'll believe you are who you are.
That's exactly the point, is that the norms of how police officers and law enforcement officers are supposed to act, totally thrown in their wastebasket by these processes. No due process, no warrants, no habeas corpus. All of it is just, we're just going to storm in and okay, here's the bloody Ted Rall we've come to know and love.
So I thought, it's so funny because, like, all the right-wing spin on social media is about how brave ICE is. And even if you approve of them and you love them and you think they're adorable, they're not brave. Okay. These are snowflakes. These are pussies. These are people who are afraid to show their faces when every other FBI agent, state trooper, local policeman is fully identified with their badge number, their name, their face exposed. And so right now, the Democrats and the Republicans are about 48 hours from a possible partial government shutdown, in part over the issue of whether ICE agents should be required to remove their masks. Obviously, they should be required to remove their masks. And I just thought it was, come on, they're like, literally, like, we need our privacy, we'll be doxxed. I was like, what a bunch of little pussies. And so that's what this is.
So the cartoonist snowflakes in Minnesota, and the first they're shooting people all over the place, and there's flames. And the first officer is saying, please don't take our masks. We need our privacy. And cookies. Send cookies.
Because they're a bunch of little boys.
There's
almost no women in ICE, apparently, right?
Does this surprise you?
No, okay. They're all in cells. And then, of course, there's the voter ID. I thought I wanted to tie in the current push for the Save America Act, which is a voter ID law, which would require Americans to present their passports or something similar in order to vote. And I just thought it was hilarious, the idea that there might well be ICE goons, fully masked and unidentified, outside of voting booths this coming November. There very well may be. And that the voters will have to show their IDs in order to get in to people who refuse to identify themselves.
So the cartoon is ID for thee, not for me. And it's voting places. Identify yourself. Freedom isn't freedom. Scan I here. No photos. And the ICE agent or is saying, show your idea. It's for protecting democracy. Yeah. And it's funny that the party in the group, the side of the political spectrum, which weirdly during COVID was so against masks, is like so pro mask now. I mean, does anyone note the irony of this? I mean,
it's so ironic. I'll show one more and then we'll get into yours.
You don't have to do that. Okay, explain this one. First of all, describe it and then explain.
So basically here you have two ICE goons fully masked, mayhem everywhere, buildings on fire, dead guy, one guy is sitting on top of a corpse, other corpses in the background. And basically the two guys are like, my wife, one guy says to the other, the ICE guy says, my wife doesn't understand me. And I just thought, like, this is kind of like a New Yorker cartoon vibe. I was kind of like going for like the fact that these are terrifying, horrific goons who are terrorizing communities, right? And honestly, they are the biggest threat to American democracy right now, the ISIS. And it's just like the idea that, like, they might have, like, in their off moments, like some kind of like guys like complaining about guy stuff. That's all it is. It's sort of like exposing the fact that they're just human beings like anybody else, and like, but they think they have the power of life and death over the rest of us. Is it too subtle?
It's subtle. It is, but I
Too
also
subtle?
think it's hilarious that if you've seen these fat incel fucks, one of them saying that they have a wife would be shocking.
True.
Bondi, the head of them, the little chihuahua with the $5 haircut, gets thrown out of a bar in Las Vegas. Yeah, this was one of mine. This is Trump polls, and the plane is falling apart and crashing to the earth, and Trump is the pilot saying, "Man, just make sure my name's on the crater." I don't know why. Crater is a funny word. And so I was kind of thinking, what can you? This was
Crater's better than debris field, which is what I would have done, because I like the phrase debris field.
Yeah, it's funny. Isn't that weird? We get hooked on either images, but we also get hooked on phrases that we like, and it's a lot of cartoonists do that.
I remember one time being on a flight out of Central Asia, and basically there was concern among the journalists on the flight that the plane was overloaded. And so there's all this arguing, and this one guy stood up. He's a journalist. He's like, I'm a licensed professional pilot in the United States. Let me tell you, this plane is not going to get off the ground. It's got too much equipment in it. And the pilot comes back, and he's like drunk as a skunk, and he's like arguing with the guy. And the guy goes, "Fine, we'll sort it all out in the debris field."
God. But you made it. You lived to tell the tale.
True. Turned out the drunk pilot was right. As they often are.
As they so often are. And this was, apparently Congress and congressmen are fleeing their jobs at historic rates. And so I just have a drawing of the Capitol building with a ton of rats escaping from it. And
those are such great rats, Scott. I got to tell you.
What's that?
The rats, the drawing of the rats is magnificent.
Yeah, that turned out really well. I was kind of surprised, but
I mean, those are some fucking good looking rats.
And thank you.
I am going to have to take issue with your use of the single quotation mark instead of the double quotation mark. You're not the only editorial cartoonist who does that. But
I do it when
double.
It's not quoting someone speaking. Is that an incorrect use? Or
incorrect? It's incorrect. Help
me understand this, because what I'm saying is the word coming out.
Single quotes are a quote within a quote. So let's say you quote like, let's say you're quoting Donald Trump. So you have that in double quotes, and Trump's saying, Scott Stantis said, and then that would be what he's quoting you saying is the single quote.
Okay.
That's the only application for it in American grammar.
Well, apparently not, because it's in my cartoon.
Yeah, well, that's also true. Things get bastardized.
For those of you listening, I have a voice coming from the Capitol saying, but we're about to start the screening of Melania. Speaking of
Yes. I mean, it's not good when your movie is just a joke for everybody.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, Ted. I've been thinking about this a lot the last since the movie was released. Would it have gotten that rap regardless? I mean, even if it was like the best documentary ever?
It would have had to have been A++++ to be given a fair treatment, for sure. And I don't know. I haven't seen it. I can't imagine it's very good, just for the simple reason that it's not a comprehensive documentary about her life story.
Yeah,
which is what I would want. Yeah, I'd want to interview, people back in, is it Slovenia or Slovakia? It's Slovenia, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
And this is Uncle Sam standing between a charging elephant and a charging donkey and saying, "Is it midterms already?" Because
the donkey looks terrifying and massive,
which is hard to draw a terrifying donkey. Just to let you know, that was not an easy art draw.
True. That's true. The art's fantastic.
Thank you. I was, but I mean, I'm sure this is true where you are. I'm sure it's true where our listeners and our viewers are. The amount of money spent in the last cycle, not the 26 cycle, but just the off-year cycle, was insane. I mean, but not here in Alabama, for a city council in this town I live in, these guys were spending six figures, which is really a lot of money for a town of under 50,000 people. Can you imagine what the numbers coming out of this the midterms are going to be? I mean, they're already crazy.
Yeah, no, I can't even.
And lastly, this is TikTok. They finally got it. The ownership shifted over to an American owner, which apparently there's still significant Chinese interest in it, which is hilarious. But I just have these tentacles coming out of this guy's slack-jawed guy's phone, and it's one of the tentacles is jamming into his forehead.
Yep.
And the second one, two tentacles coming out. The one tentacle going into the forehead. Second one is holding a flag. First one is China. And the second panel, it's an American flag. And the phone is saying problem solved. Because, I don't give a crap who owns these things or who's, we're talking about what information of ours is being mined. And it's a lot. I mean, a whole lot. And it's, everything. That's why I don't bother about privacy anymore, Ted, because seriously,
there ain't none.
There isn't any. So, when it says, do you mind if we do this, or, look, can you tell us where you are? Or do you mind if we know where you are? I'm like, I don't, sure. You're fine. Here, do you have a different issue on this, or?
Well, I always lie about where am I and stuff like that. Yeah. So this is a funny conversation. So you'll remember all the arguments I used to have with my fellow executives at United Media when I was there. And at one point, we were discussing the new relaunch of comics.com, which was the United feature website for all of the comic strips and editorial cartoons. Yes. And the discussion came up we're going to collect all this data. Of course, this was the young Wharton graduate who brought this up. And we'll ask everybody how old they are and what their gender is. We'll be able to sell that data, blah, 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 blah. And I said, so I asked, is that data reliable? And she's like, why wouldn't it be? And I'm like, well, I always say I'm a 99-year-old woman. And she goes, you do that? And she's incredulous. And I go, yeah, because I don't. If they want my data, they have to pay for it. I'm not going to give it to them voluntarily. And she said, "You're an example of everything that's wrong in the world." And I was like, I thought that was capitalism, but okay,
or communism, depending on which side of
depending on how you feel. But just
she really said that.
Yeah, she literally said that. Wow. Yeah.
Wow, because you're untruthful in a survey.
Right, in a survey that I didn't want to take and did not volunteer to take. I just want to look at a comic. Anyway, that's I'm look, here's the thing. You're right, Scott. Obviously, privacy does not exist. They know anything and everything about us. They know everything. They know our socials, they know our bank accounts, they know how much is in the bank account, they know everything. That said, I'm not going to give it away. It's kind of like, you can rape me, but I'm still going to kick and scream every time you do. I'm not going to make it easier on you. And so I'm not going to volunteer. I'm not going to go easy. I'm not going to go softly into that good night.
Fair enough. Hey, on a different issue, the other night my wife and I were watching the Olympic coverage, and NBC broke in with breaking news. Yeah, British cartooning but British cartooning is still in serious trouble, by the way. That's one of our commenters just did that. But we were watching the Olympics, and they broke in with breaking news on the Guthrie kidnapping case.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the police, the crack Pima County Sheriff's Department had picked up a person of interest following the release of those videos from the ring. And we talked about why it took them 2 weeks to figure out what's your IP address. It's 196.5. Oh, okay. And they typed it in, and they figured out that they could actually get to the video. And so the Pima Sheriff's Department picked somebody up, but NBC broke into coverage, it's pre-recorded coverage of, Martina says surveys are evil. And you ain't wrong. To announce this news, it turns out the guy was pulled over in a traffic stop, and I guess he had a beard or something, or mustache, that you can see through the ski mask in the video. It's why I still, Ted, we talked about this on your other show, your other podcast, and so why are we losing our mind over this story? And to break in with a breaking news, which, by the way, again, I'm going to sound like an old man, which I am, so I can sound like one. But breaking news back in the day, if you were watching television and this is a CBS special report, the president has been shot. Something extraordinary has happened. And, the fact that some poor schlub was pulled over by the Pima County Sheriff's Department and taken in because he happened to kind of have the same stuff around his mouth that the guy in the video had. We're losing our minds, and we're losing our sense of what journalistically is important. And we don't seem to care or have the patience to wait for the journalistic process to make sure something's true, to find out what this exactly was before it goes before the public. And that's been a trend for years now. But last night was or 2 nights ago, was such a glaring example, Ted, of how journalism has lost its way, and it's not run by professionals anymore or by sober individuals. Would you agree with that?
I certainly agree with the fact that your assessment of journalism, but I don't agree that this wasn't a major story. I mean, this is I think that the arrest of a person of interest in an incredibly interesting and bizarre kidnapping case is certainly something that if I were a producer, I would be wanting to announce to the public. I would say, this person, this very famous person's mother has been missing for 12 days. The cops have picked someone up. It's the first apparent lead in the case that we've seen in almost 2 weeks. I think I would have also wanted to break into the coverage. I mean, if you look at, the thing is, these high profile kidnappings don't happen very often, right? And when they do, they have a very different dynamic. They tend to be babies, back in 1956, Peter Weinberger was, and of course the Lindbergh baby, or they tend to be young. In the last 30, 40 years, it was these young girls, right? Like J.C. Dugard and Elizabeth Smart, and in the 70s, it was political figures, right? Like Aldo Moro, the Italian prime minister.
Patty Hearst.
Killed by the Red Brigades, right? Patty Hearst, of course, the Symbionese Liberation Army, and that was the whole Stockholm Syndrome thing. And John Paul Getty III, Paul Getty's son, who they cut off his ear before Dad decided he was going to pay. And there's Adolf Coors III, right, from the beer fortune back in the early 60s. Those were, kind of like they fit a certain profile. I had forgotten. I just looked this up. Frank Sinatra Jr.
Oh, right.
1963. He was 19 years old. He was the son of, obviously, Old Blue Eyes. Kidnapped in Lake Tahoe. They paid off $240,000 at the time to get him back. But the point is, those have nothing quite fits the profile of like an 84, I believe, years old, either 82 or 84, an elderly octogenarian, mother or parent of this, kind of apolitical morning TV, Savannah Guthrie host. I mean, it's bizarre. And then you get the eerie footage of apparently an ICE agent at the front door of the of the Ring doorbell. I love the fact that like pro-ICE media, like New York Post, Murdoch property, they called it eerie and disturbing. And it's like, but you guys favor eerie, the same exact eerie and disturbing look when they're terrorizing American citizens in the streets of Minneapolis. So anyway, but the point is, I think it's a big story, Scott. I think kidnappings are weird. Kidnappings are unusual. High profile ones are really unusual. So,
Yeah, but does it warrant this kind of hysterical interest? I mean, it just, and
I think it does.
The other thing that drove NBC to do that is the constant pressure to be first.
Well, I mean, come on. What if it turns out that they're arresting the guy?
Apparently they didn't.
No, they didn't. And that's where, we have a problem, right? I mean, this guy's life is never going to be the same. A lot of people are never going to have heard that he wasn't the suspect.
Did they actually release a name?
100%. Now, I will give the guy mad props for the way he handled it. I mean, even though he's not a well-educated dude, he decided to call a press conference and basically tell his side of the story and express his anger about it. So he got his narrative out there, so anybody who searches will find it. That was the right way to handle it. So mad props to him. But not everyone would be that sophisticated.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're talking about the video. I just want to talk, everyone else is talking about it as people who are graphically motivated, that's how we view the world. And watching this guy, how much you want to bet this is going to turn out to be some incel schlub who lives 3 doors down? Because when they say it's eerie and weird, and it's not, it's just this lumbering, weird dude, overweight dude who tries to cover up the camera lens with flowers, which is bizarre.
So bizarre.
His hand gesture, he's just sort of stumbling
why
around.
is it? I mean, nobody's addressed this. Why is the footage in black and white? Aren't Google Nest cameras in color?
Well, except I think they're night vision. Low light. Your camera does that on your phone even, I think. But most security cameras go black and white.
Matina viewer says, no, it doesn't warrant coverage. I don't even know Savannah Guthrie. I've never even seen her on TV. I've barely ever seen her. I don't watch her. I don't watch the Today Show ever. But tens of millions of people do.
Yeah, I guess because of there's 3 of us, our commenter and you and me. I had no idea who she was when they mentioned this.
I mean, it's kind of like she was a familiar face once I saw in the news article. And it was like, oh yeah, I've seen that lady, I think, but not on the Today Show because I never watch it ever.
Yeah, and the guy in the video clearly has no idea how video works. I mean, it's just it's such amateur hour. So it's not weird. It's not terrifying. It's actually almost laughable if you didn't know what it was attached to.
Right. Well, there was some reporting suggesting that his attempt to disable it actually caused it to save. So apparently Nancy Guthrie, the mother, the victim here, did not pay for the premium
Right.
Google Nest service, which meant that all there really is there's no recording. At least she doesn't get the recording. We now know that Google keeps the recording, which is interesting. And that basically that's probably not something most Americans are aware of who have Google Nest. But anyway, the recording was there. That basically it triggered a recorded loop because it was disabled, is what I don't know how accurate that is.
Well, the scene, the photographs from the scene where the blood was, you can see where the doorbell has been torn off.
Yeah, and I guess the flowers were an attempt to cover it up.
I guess, again, this is amateur hour. So like I said, this is going to turn out to be some incel weirdo lives in his parents' basement, 4 doors down. I'm convinced of this now.
You don't think it's a professional operator? Well, what if Nancy Guthrie? She's probably not with us anymore.
I would guess. I mean, why? That was apparently it's confirmed that was her blood on the bricks in front of the door. The fact that you had to, accost an 82. What was she overpowering you?
Right.
Seriously. I mean, I'm like,
maybe. I mean, look, the thing is, they left a lot of details out, right? When they said there's blood, right? Well, I mean, is it a drop of blood? Is it like
there's pictures of it,
bucket of blood? You
can see it. There's spatters all in front of the front door.
So it's a lot.
It's not a little. I wouldn't say it was.
Would you say it like indicates a gunshot or a stabbing?
I would say, yeah, some kind of a wound, some kind of a significant laceration. Yeah.
That's it's very disturbing.
It's deeply disturbing. And, but the other thing that's really disturbing, and let's move back to the public policy here, Ted, is the fact that, and I mentioned this on Deprogrammed when I was with Ted on Ted's other podcast, the Ring company that owns that doorbell said, we can help find your dog. Just if your dog runs away, upload his picture to our Help Your Dog, at our site, and we'll use Ring technology. If it'll see your dog or use AI, it'll say, hey, here's Fluffy. An hour ago it ran past this house, and we will contact you and let you know. But what that opens up is this incredible can of retraction of civil liberties, that your motions, everything you do, because these doorbells are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They are just ridiculously popular for obvious reasons. I mean, that makes it convenient.
Well, they're also cheaper than traditional like doorbells. If you were going to install or repair like an old-fashioned like Ringer doorbell with a chime to your house, it would cost about $200 now. You can get a Ring one for $50. Yeah.
Okay, well, that answers that. But the fact is, like, the two things: the fact that they are obviously monitoring these video feeds from all and so that they can run it through AI and find Poochie. And two, the fact that they found this video. This guy tells you that they are holding on, and that may be why it took so long for Ring to say, "Yeah, we have the video."
Yeah, it could be like that. Yeah. For sure.
Because apparently they have a record of every movement. Ted, I can remember.
Which means the NSA has it too.
Oh, of course. I can remember back, I have to think it was back in the 90s. It was an NBC or CBS News report. And it was, we're going to have one of our interns. How often are they being recorded from their apartment down to the studio?
Mm-hmm.
And doing what they usually do. They stopped by a 7-Eleven to get a cup of coffee. They picked up a newspaper at a news rack. And it was kind of remarkable that close to 80% of their walk, this was back in the 90s, was on video.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so what percentage, I mean, how do you have over 100% of your day? I mean, I cover up the cameras on my phone, on my laptop, on my iPad, but they say even that doesn't really.
No, I mean, my camera, I can just go like that, And,
what do you have? What is that?
So I have an external camera on my because my desktop is quite old. It's 8 years old. So the camera resolution was not good enough for podcasting. So I forget what the name of this little camera is, but it's one that it's like $150. You clip it to the top of your computer, and it comes with a little slidey thing that allows you to do that.
Nice. No,
So-
I have to get actually like piece of tape.
Well, everybody in Silicon Valley, all the tech overlords, they all have tape on their cameras on their laptops.
That's hilarious. Well, that's all you need to know. I mean, so as you know, if you're not doing anything wrong, I go, well, that's not the point. The surveillance state now is so pervasive. Ring replaces far more expensive security systems. Yeah.
Sure.
Because you can also, don't they also offer packages of like, if you open up a window, open up a door, and one of our commenters says that they have tape on theirs. Yeah. I wonder if does that work? I mean, they can't see through the tape.
According to Ed Snowden, at least that technology was old, but yeah, of course it works. I mean, the NSA apparently, like in the Snowden revelations, among the many, many other things that he revealed, he said that the NSA guys would like look through people's laptop cameras and look at, nude people having sex and, take screenshots and, just have a good time. So
brave new world, my friend, brave new world.
Americans are, your taxpayer dollars at work. Scott, before we go, there was some strange breaking news. The Gallup poll has decided to stop doing presidential approval ratings. Did you hear about this?
What?
Yeah, let me find the story.
Yeah, please read that because I had not heard that. I learned so much listening to this podcast.
Here we go. Gallup will no longer track presidential approval ratings after more than 8 decades of doing so. They said that they would stop publishing favorability ratings of individual political figures, saying it reflects an evolution in how Gallup focuses its public research and thought leadership. Okay, so those are words that don't mean anything. Our commitment is to long-term, methodically sound research on issues and conditions that shape people's lives. A spokesperson continued to say, using words that don't mean anything. That work will continue through the Gallup Poll Social Series, the Gallup Quarterly Business Review, the World Poll, and our portfolio of U.S. and global research. For decades, it has been among the top parameters cited by media outlets measuring public opinion of the president's performance. And continuing with Gallup's effort to use words that don't mean anything, they said, this is a change as part of a broader ongoing effort to align all of Gallup's public work with its mission. We look forward to continuing to offer independent research that adheres to the highest standards of social science. When asked if Gallup had received any feedback from the White House, they said this is a strategic shift solely based on Gallup's research goals and priorities.
I'm sorry for the silence. I'm shocked because Gallup for decades, as the story mentioned, was the hallmark of presidential approval ratings.
And Trump's approval rating is currently under 37%, which is pretty much around the point where you get impeached, forced to resign, or overthrown by a revolution.
Is there anyone, is this breaking now? So did they just announce it? Or?
Well, it came out like an hour ago or two. It's really weird. I don't understand at all. Matina says President got to Gallup. I got to say, it sounds like it.
Yeah, what it sounds like to me, Ted, here, if I could venture, actually coming from that world for a very short period of time, but working in campaigns, you pay top dollar for polling. And campaign, don't forget, it's not just the polls you hear about: presidential approval, congressional approval, all those other things. It is, it is the Senate campaign here in Alabama. It is the congressional in an small Ohio district that they pay top dollar for polling, for good polling from places like, say it with me, kids, Gallup. And my guess is that the Republican Party may have said, we will have none of our candidates use Gallup, and that would be a massive hit to Gallup and its income and its bottom line. That has to be what's driving this.
Okay, that now I can see clearly now the rain is gone. All right, that's great. Scott, I suspect you're like one of the few people who's going to have that insight into that story, and I really thank you for that, because
that's what drives people is money. You know, I mean, come on. Let's always start with that as
that's what's going on here. Yeah, no, I 100% believe that.
So the Republican, now that would be the question to ask: did the Republican Party, through any of its sources, approach the Gallup people saying, "Listen, we don't like you guys dissing the president," which they're not dissing the president; they're just compiling numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't like what those numbers are saying. Stop the numbers, or we'll tell our Republican candidates that the National Republican Committee will no longer give money for polling to any campaign that uses Gallup.
That's what's going on.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much for that.
Hey.
So just a little bit of housekeeping. So guys, let us know. Scott and I are thinking of upping the ante here and doing this show daily. So if you guys are, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your impact.
Is once a week enough for you guys, or would you watch every day? Love to hear from you guys. You can go to rall.com/contact. And I will pass everything on to Scott that I get from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. We are here at this point every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll be back starting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with John Kiriakou for Deprogram. That's Eastern Time also. Please like, follow, and share the show. Scott, always nice to see you. Talk to you soon. And
sorry that Steve Kelley didn't work out. That's a shame.
We've got it. He's such a good guest. We've got to talk to him about improving his internet connection. Okay, so Scott, it's now time for the audio entertainment portion.
And lean and tan and handsome, the girl from Ipanema is handsome, and when she goes by, the people go, ah. You're welcome.